Hi, this is Questionable Adam from HerdMentalityPodcast.com, a sporadically produced third-rate podcast where we interview complete strangers from Twitter. You are listening to the We Agnostics podcast. It's a weekly dose of recovery for the non-religious. Now, I may not believe in the supernatural, but I do believe in you.
This is Justin. I'm here with Chuck at Woden Cemetery. We're here at the beautiful Park Cemetery in Canberra. So, Chuck, could you tell us a little bit about why we are here today?
Well, I think you want me to talk about the fact that I've just passed my 41st anniversary of continuous sobriety, thanks to AANA, and that being an older sober member, you wanted to get me on tape or on electronically before I claim one of the plots at one of the cemeteries and pass on and only have my voice to be remembered. So basically what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I came into AA at 33. I'm now 74. I came into AA in Boston, Massachusetts, and then after a year, or less than a year, moved out to California, to the San Jose, San Francisco Bay Area. And then from there, in 1981, came to Sydney, and then in 1985 from Sydney to Canberra, where I've been since then. So that's the dates, as it were. So where do you want me to start? Before I used to drink and drug, so I identify as Chuck, an addict, alcoholic, or an alcoholic addict. One of my friends who's now in the cemetery, I think, who died after having 30 years of sobriety, said, "So Chuck, you're an ANDA." And I go, "What's an ANDA?" And he says, "You're alcoholic and addict." And yes, I used to do speed and all kinds of alcohol, drank every day, always was topped up, never drew a sober breath for probably 10 or 15 years. And then basically what happened was I went to a pub one day, and they said, "Geez, you look terrible." I said, "I've been thrown up." And they said, "Yeah, your skin doesn't look good, and you're skinny as." And they had mentioned to me that one of the jobs I lost, the coverage from my health coverage ran out at the end of the month, and that because it costs money in America to go to medicos, at that time they said, "Look, before it ends, you should probably go and see a doctor while it's still not going to cost you anything." So I went to this Harvard Health program thing that I still had an entitlement to, and they said, "There's not much we can do for you. Your liver is shot. You've only got a few weeks or a few months to live." And I said, "What kind of program can I get into?" And they said, "Well, you got no money. You're unemployed. You're living in a squat. You don't have anything, and your health fund runs out at the end of the month. So the best thing we can suggest is you go to AA." So I went to my first AA meeting, which was near my house in a school, and I had my dog with me. I always walk the streets with my dog as a sort of protection. And the dog wouldn't go in, and I always thought that the dog knew something I didn't know. But years later I realized that because it was a school, my dog, whose dogs always ran loose those days, without being on a leash, had probably been shooed away from the school and all the kids so many times that he wouldn't go in. So he didn't know anything more than I knew. And there was a whole bunch of old men in this room. They were smoking up a storm. One good-looking female. She obviously had brought her grandfather. She couldn't be an alcoholic. They were all talking about sleeping under bridges. And I thought, well, I'm not that bad. What are these doctors talking about? With only a few weeks or months or a little bit of time to live. I'm not living under a bridge. I got a roof over my head, even though it's a squat. And so I went back to the doctors and I said, well, that's not going to work. And they suggested that I go to a young people's meeting outside of Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is like a suburb of Boston. And they had a meeting there. It was a meeting where 3 or 4 different people talked. And then we all could ask questions. And it was sort of a panel discussion type of thing after each person had told their story. Guy had talked about how he got AA in prison and hadn't had a drink since he got out. That was his motorcycle in the foyer of the church hall. There was dripping oil on the nice wooden floor. And he said if anybody touched it, he'd kill them. That he had killed 2 guys. One that got him into prison, and one was a warder when he was in prison. And he just lifted up a warder by the cuffs and tipped him over the railing, and the guy plummeted to the floor. And then, because there was no CTV at that time, all the other people said they didn't see anything. And since there was no witnesses, so there he was at an AA meeting saying how he killed somebody, and never got punished for it. And I thought, ooh, geez, that's pretty honest. So I made a major decision to go to California. And in California, I met my sponsor. It was a woman. She was also an atheist like I am. And I stayed there until I came to Australia in 81. So from 77 to, from March 19th, 1977 till October of 81, I was sober in America, and then I came here and had lots of adventures. Came to Australia, stayed in Sydney for a while, set up a couple of meetings, one of which is still going, and 30 some odd years later. And then came to Canberra, which is the capital of Australia, and been here ever since. So, and he's, that's sort of a overview, timeline and stuff.
Yeah. So what, how have you found that you've had to work to understand or to make sense of the steps for you?
Right. Well, in terms of the first step, I believe that for me, it's written upside down. It should say, instead of saying, we admit it, we are powerless over alcohol, and our lives have become unmanageable. For me, the only thing that made sense to me was figuring out how my life was unmanageable, whether it really was or wasn't, in what way it was. And then, what was the cause of the unmanageability? Was it the fact that I got ADD? Was it the fact that, and I've been in trouble lots of my life? Was it the fact that whenever I drank, I drug sought? Was it the drugs that got me into trouble, or was it the drinking? I had to figure out that if I didn't drink, I didn't seek drugs. And so NA helped me with that. Was it because I was an adult child of alcoholism? So I went to Al-Anon and worked on my adult child of an alcoholic. And, I sort of slowly cleared away the wreckage of my past, but I came to understand that I'm not powerless over alcohol as long as it's not inside me. So, I can walk past the liquor store, and in the early days something was sort of coming out, wafting in the air, saying, "Chuck, we're in here waiting for you." And everybody's having a great time, wish you were here. And I had to realize that if I went and had one drink and put the alcohol in me, even if it was in cough syrup or if it was in other substances like food or whatever, that could lead me back to where I didn't want to be. So for the second step, I had to accept the fact that I was crazy, that I was insane. Part of my insanity was what the Buddhists call, I'm a humanist atheist, and I found that Buddhism had a spirituality that doesn't have a god or goddess in it, especially the mindfulness type of Buddhism, Theravada, or insight Buddhism. And so I found that for the second step, I had to recognize my own delusions, and that all that I had to do is come to believe that the power greater than myself, which I saw as the group. I saw that all the help that I got with the first step in recognizing what my problem was came from humans. And as a humanist, I depend on humans. I don't depend on anything supernatural. And so, in terms of the second step, anytime I saw myself doing wishful thinking, delusional thinking, magical thinking, or any of those sorts of things, reading into omens like the black crow that's on somebody's grave, just making noises in the background, is just nature. It has nothing to do with any mystical, magical thinking, unless I put that into it. And it's not my ancestor or my lover who's buried here, having died from terrible alcoholism. One of my lovers. For me, it was that simple. It was a group of drunks, a good orderly direction that I got from them, and it was people. And then for the third step, unlike a lot of Australians who talk about handing over their will and their life, for me, I was taught turnover, that the words actually turn over. And that if I'm holding a book upside down and I complain that I can't read it, it's maybe because I have to turn it over and turn it right side up, meaning it has to do, like me, a 180-degree turn. And that good orderly direction. And I listened to everybody else's gods and goddesses in the fellowship, AA, NA, or whatever, and to let them have their stuff. I'm not in a debating society. I'm not out to convince. I'm not a militant atheist. I'm not trying to convert people to atheism. Funny thing is, though, since I started saying in the rooms that I was an atheist, not being ashamed of it, that I was a humanist atheist, more and more people have come up to me and said, "Me too, me too, me too." And before you know it, there's been enough so that in Canberra now, there's 2 atheist agnostic groups out of 40 other AA groups, which is pretty impressive for a city of 340,000 in terms of Australian AA. So, then fourth step, my atheist sponsor said, shine the light in every corner. Don't be afraid. If you found something inside of yourself, like an Appendix 2, where you tap an heretofore untapped inner resource, by finding courage inside of myself first, and then finding love for myself and then for others in the fellowships, and then finding that they love me enough to try to heal me, that the great spirit of compassionate love is my third step power greater than myself, and God as I understand him. Thanks to atheist Jimmy Burrell, who got Bill Wilson to put As We Understood Him in that step and one of the other steps. And then, so I went on and did my fourth step. I found patterns in my fourth step. I found by starting off with first drink my uncle gave me, but then after that I stole drinks from my parents, and then stealing became one of the things that I did in life in my drinking and drugging days. So starting with that pattern, I could see how that influenced stealing from employers by not working, by taking pens home, by making my workplace my stationery store, and by stealing time and so on. And then that widened out into understanding that one of the things that I stole most from other people was their time. And then going on into seeing the patterns of how I treated people by seeing them as, especially women, as objects, that everybody actually existed to appease my ego. My ego deflation started to come in thanks to AA, and I started getting a small degree of humbleness. For my fifth step, I asked her if she could type up something that I had written. She said, sure. And so she typed it up, and she called me up and said, Chuck, is this your, she was in the fellowship and had also worked at my workplace, and she said, Chuck, is this your fifth step? And I said, yeah. And so we sat down together, and she said, now Chuck, is this one of the patterns that you're identifying? I go, what do you mean? She said, well, is one of your patterns being sneaky? And I go, of course, you can't be a thief. Unless you're sneaky, you can't cheat. Unless you're sneaky, you can't, do things behind people's back. Unless you're sneaky. And she said, well, you're doing that by doing your fifth step. And I said, look, you typed it out, so that means you read it. And she said, I'm a typist, and I type word by word. I don't get the sense of it. I'm not typing for content. I'm just typing to translate the hand-printed word or handwritten word into typeface. And so you're going to have to sit there and read it to me if you're going to choose me. So I did my fifth step with her. And out of that, I saw lots of patterns in my life that needed changing. For the sixth and seventh step, I see a difference between shortcomings where I come up short and character defect where I have to go right back as any defect in a car would have to do. I have to do a complete recall. So if a Volkswagen or a Mustang or something blows up or has some sort of defect, all the cars are recalled, and they have to go back to the design stage, and they have to redesign the brakes or whatever it is that blows up or is faulty and has a defect. Whereas a shortcoming, if I have a pinhole in my particular petrol tank and there's not enough petrol or gasoline to stay in there because it's dripping out, well, I have to patch that up. I don't have to redesign the whole petrol tank. I just have to put more effort into it. So if I get on a bus and they say it's $1.50 and it's only got $1.45, I have to beg, borrow, or steal the other 5 cents. I've come up short. I'm not defective because I don't have 5 cents. So I ask people, can I borrow 5 cents? Or can somebody help me with 5 cents? Or I got to persuade the driver to let me continue on. It's not a defect. I know Bill Wilson said there wasn't 10 cents worth of difference between the two, but I think there is. I think there's a huge difference for me. And for me, a shortcoming means I have to put more effort into it. So if my shortcoming is I interrupt you, then one of the things that I have to do is I have to listen. If I have a shortcoming, then I'm not patient enough. The guy that I talked about earlier who died when he had 30 years of sobriety, he used to say to people to stand in the longest queue in the supermarket. To this day, I won't let robots tell me how much I owe. I make sure I provide a job for a checkout person and somebody that I can interact with and talk to. And if it's a long line, I wait there patiently, knowing that there's things that I could be doing inside my head